Hi, my name is Amit Dital. I'm doing this video for the NoSQL subject, which is taught by Professor JeongKyu. Within my research for various databases, I'm doing it on Druid database. A Druid database is a open source column-oriented distributed data store. It it handles, it manages its queries through column-oriented structure. So we'll go through what Druid database is and how does it work, how the installation goes on, and what are the main advantages of using Druid database. On this part, I'll be describing about what is Druid database. It is an open source object-oriented database system that was established to cover the issue of online advertising and marketing. The online advertising and marketing used to collect huge amount of data, and on that huge amount of data it is really hard to process the whole data. So to cover that reason, Druid database has some key features such as it does OLAP queries, it helps in real-time streaming ingestion, power analytical applications, cost effectiveness, and highly scalability. The database that is captured by the Druid database is stored in the columns and with the indexing with the keys. So when the data is stored on the columns, it will have an key index to it from which we can access the column. So this method is typically faster, and there are various ways of querying that data. Some of them are normal queries, aggregate queries, group by queries, metadata queries, and the search queries. Some of the best characteristics are it does OLAP queries, real-time string ingestion, as per said before. The data model has like three components, namely data schema, IO config, and tuning config. All of these are implemented in JSON structure. I'll describe about the structure later. So where does the motivation comes for this database? The motivations comes from the backlogs of SQL databases. The relational databases had problems, that's why Druid database has to come into existence. The problem is like the linked SQL queries needs a lot of time for processing. If the data is very large, it cannot process, or it takes high amount of time that is not feasible for real-time applications. So when there used to be request of a lot of users on a server, then it wouldn't be able to handle the load because it's quite slow. Then the Druid database was involved, and when it was involved, it had like GPU license, and later it got support from Apache and got licensed under Apache. This can be implemented on the top of the Hadoop architecture, the HDFS file system. So in recent time, many big industries are using Druid database. Some of them are like Yahoo, eBay, PayPal, Airbnb. So what are the characteristics of Druid database? The main characteristics of Druid databases are sub-second OLAP queries, real-time streaming ingestion, power analytic applications. It's cost effective, it's highly available, and highly scalable. So what we can do with the OLAP queries in Druid database? So it enables multi-dimensional data filtering and scanning the way it is needed in the queries. It can aggregate data in milliseconds and process very faster in very efficient way. Under real-time streaming ingestion, it processes data on batches. It processes data on small chunks, and later those chunks are accessed in the distributed environment so that it's very efficient. It power analytic applications, it means like it can process like thousands of concurrent users at a time in a distributed manner. It's cost effective, that means it takes very less time and processes huge amount of data in second. This lowers the cost of server processing, which reduces the cost of whole application. It is highly available. It means like it can process data, it can update when the update is going on. You don't need to wait till the update gets finished and you take time later to process the data. So it can backup SaaS that needs to run on the server all the time. Plus it is scalable. Scalable means it can handle petabytes of data and trillions of events in a second. So how does the data model looks like? It has three types as said before. It's data schema, IO config, and tuning config. Data schema is the JSON object which is required in main to create the schema. It specifies the schema for incoming data and share the same schema with other systems. IO config is also a JSON object which just defines the path of the data and vary with the ingestion method. Tuning config is also an JSON object, so it shows how to tune ingestion implementation. It can be made optional. We don't need to write tuning config all the time. So I have looked over the format of the data model. It looks like this: data schema, IO config, tuning config as a single JSON object, and every schema is a JSON object again. So this shows the data schema JSON structure, where we have data source, we have parser, type of the parser, dimensions, metric space, field names, type names of the metric, and so on. So how does the manipulation occurs in Druid database? So the queries are the REST style. We post some queries, we get some queries. That way the query is executed. Over here, a query in the node, execution of a query in a node is shown by this line, curl x post. But when the query fails, it also returns the JSON object to the user, saying what is the error, what is the class of the error, and which host it derived from. So some of more applications of Druid database are, it is divided into the following categories. Applications are time boundary, segment metadata, data source metadata, and search metadata query. These are some of the aggregate queries where we define the query type, what type of query type it is, where is the data source, what's the descending ascending order is, what type of filter we are applying, what type of aggregations we are doing on which samples, what types of aggregations we will do later after the processing of data is done, what next aggregation we can apply. The other type of queries are group by queries, where we define the query type, data source, dimensions, where do we apply the filters, aggregations, and post aggregations. So as per the research done so far by me, it is highly scalable and it has high efficiency in distributed environment. Plus every node in Druid database can process petabytes of data by using various query models. So how does it work? It starts with loading the data, assigning huge chunks of data to various nodes, and then processing the data on every node. As we always know, the Druid database has the JSON format. So as per we knew, there are various ways of querying data, such as normal queries, aggregate queries, group by queries, metadata queries, search queries. These all queries can be made through as a type of business intelligent OLAP queries. And the best characteristic of Druid database, as said before, are sub-second OLAP queries, real-time streaming ingestion, power analytic applications, cost effectiveness, high availability, and scalability. Thank you, Professor Lee, for giving us such an insight of the knowledge of Druid database, and thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you so much.